That's always. Well, yes, the first thing we are, so I give them a login. And then I was teaching adult already, I guess she slowly coming early, so all of a sudden class. The day of that, I mean, like. That was our name. It was somebody like. That was one of the dreams.
I look forward to seeing you coming back, because I don't like to be.
You're good.
Gail has decided to stay. She doesn't seem to have the same ability she used to have it. And she says this. But those are what you do.
Good morning. Thank you, brave souls who have come out in the cold, and thank you online, brave souls at your computers. We appreciate all of you. We're glad you're here. My name is Susan Caldwell, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at All Souls. This is a church where we are united not by a common creed, but by a covenant, by the promises that we make to each other for the way that we will be together in community. And from our differences. So if you care to worship with us, you are welcome here. We view the word worship in terms of its Old English roots, meaning to elevate or contemplate matters of worth. And varied, but again, as I said, that's what we appreciate about each other. On and not going on.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Russell. For January, our volunteer of the month is Ms. Suzette. If there is something happening at this church with our partner organizations, anything All Souls adjacent or All Souls legitimate, Susan Yellett is involved in it. She gives countless hours to our congregation, and we really appreciate her. There will be a congregational meeting in 2 weeks on February 4th after the 11 o'clock service. We will have it in person in the sanctuary as well as accessible by Zoom. Anyone is welcome to attend. Only members are able to vote, though, and we'll be voting on our budget for this coming church year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And a reminder, in case anyone didn't get the word, the World Religion Day celebration that was originally planned for today will not happen today for various reasons, mainly complications of our recent weather adventures. We are working on rescheduling later in the year, so watch your emails and your social media and all that stuff. And this space, watch this space, and we'll let you know when it's going to happen. I encourage you now just to kind of take a breath. And let it out, and as you let it out, feel your shoulders relaxing down from your ears. And do it again. And you'll find they can probably sink just a little bit more, because they do have a tendency to creep up, especially if you've had a hurried morning getting here. Just try to leave that behind and join us in the spirit of worship. Will you sing with me, "Come, Come, Whoever You Are"? The words are from the Sufi poet Rumi. They've been adapted by one of our Unitarian Universalist ministers, Lynn Adair. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come, one more time. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer of leaving, ours is no caravan of unite in our differences and belief. We unite with gratitude and hope. Hope for a world of difference. Hope for a world that honors difference. We unite in community with gratitude for difference. On this day that would have been the 23rd annual celebration of World Religion Day, Shreveport-Bossier, we look forward to future celebrations as we honor the spirit of that event and the third source of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. And our guest speaker this morning, whom you will hear from later, his name is Taha Hyatt, and I invited him to be our guest speaker today because of so many people that I know. He embodies the spirit of World Religion Day in the way that he is so eager and willing to learn about all faith traditions and to really participate from the inside. And to me, when I think of the spirit of that event and the spirit of our third source, Taha was the first person who came to mind. Would someone like to help me with the children's chalice lighting this morning? It does not have to be a child, although a child is very welcome. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind. This is the church of the helping hands. This is the church of the loving heart. Together with mind, hands, and heart, we care for the earth and for each other. That little flame, hang on, that is really good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Kinder conclusion: to love and let live, to embrace and forgive, to sustain and care. Help us to reach out to our better selves, that we may love more and hate less, care more and reject less, that bound together by understanding, we may sustain each other through trial and tribulation, through joy and happiness, through sickness and health. Source and Spirit of life, God of our many understandings, help us to be joined in a common purpose of hope and fulfillment. Renew and revive us. We seek a common holy ground for one and all. Amen. Would you rise in body or spirit and join me in the unison affirmation? The words will be on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the sacred. Thus do we covenant with each other. And our opening hymn is going to be around. And it'll be on the screen. It's a very simple one verse. And Sally and Bob are going to help me out.
We are about evenly split. So this side will end up being the part A, and this one will be part B.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's all sing it together first. And I have not gone to hit an F, so let's see how we do here. It might be a good idea. Otherwise, I know I'll start at one. That's not so bad. You can do that. So it's building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Okay, so we're going to do this in a two-part round, not a four-part round. We'll try that another day. So we, over here, as Sally said, over here, we'll start, and then y'all will
And
come.
we will bring in part B.
Right,
We'll tell you when to start singing at the number 1.
all right. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me?
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, would you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Thank you, and thank you.
I think that part of it got lost there.
So I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Like many Unitarian Universalists, I grew up in another faith tradition that's becoming less and less so. We now have a number of ministers who are born and raised Unitarian Universalists, which is a wonderful thing. I came largely out of the Catholic tradition with a lot of Presbyterian thrown in because my mother did not convert. But one thing I loved and still love when I go to a Catholic Mass is, and that's, most of you probably know, that is what Catholics call their worship services. It can be very different from a Unitarian Universalist service in that pretty much so much of the liturgy, so many of the words are the same from week to week. We have a few things like that here, right? We have what? What do we do that's the same every week? The unison affirmation, that's liturgy. That's part of our liturgy. What's another thing we do every week? That's right, children's chalice lighting, that also. That's liturgy for us. Well, there's a lot of liturgy in a Catholic Mass, which is really wonderful because when you go from one church to the other, you know what to expect, you know what to say, you know when to kneel, those kinds of things. And that was actually something that I enjoyed, but something that I really, really enjoyed was something called passing the peace. And I think this happens, I've seen it happen in Lutheran churches and Methodist churches and besides just the Catholic Church. But at some point, people would stand and say to anyone who was nearby and shake their hands, sometimes hug them if they knew them well enough and people were okay with it. And they would say, "Peace be with you." And the other person would say, "And also with you." And I would encourage you in just a little while, if you would like to, that we might do that. But first of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our speaker today has grown up in the Muslim tradition, and Muslims have something similar to passing the peace, but it's not necessarily in the context of a worship service. It's whenever they meet anywhere in the world. They kind of pass the peace in Arabic in that they say, "Assalamu alaikum," which means peace be with you. And then the other person will say, "Wa alaikum assalam," and I'm looking over at our speaker to make sure that I have done that, which is basically, "and also with you." And here's the really wonderful thing. In the Muslim tradition, there are like 99 words to explain God, to say who God is and what God does. And so some of the Muslim words to describe God include mercy and justice and gentleness and generosity and friend and guide. And I love that some of those words are compassion and love and peace. So that when someone says to you, Assalamu alaikum, they may be saying, justice be with you, mercy be with you, compassion be with you, love be with you, and God be with you. And I love that. So I would like you, if I say, peace be with you, yeah, if I say, Assalamu alaikum, Walaikum assalam. Walaikum assalam. And so I would invite you, as you are willing, to rise in body or spirit, look at someone next to you, and if you want to shake their hand, if you are on hugging terms, that's fine too. If you just want to bow, that's okay. I know we're in flu and cold and COVID and everything season, so it's fine just to bow, but just peace be with you and also with you. Let's try that right now. And so now we get to sing peaceful greetings to our children. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. The meditation this morning is adapted from the prayer of Shantideva, an 8th century Buddhist monk. This monk has been a major inspiration to the Dalai Lama, who often references the original prayer. And you can find the original prayer online. But this adaptation is done by the Reverend Karen G. Johnston, who is senior minister of the First Unitarian Society of Burlington, Vermont. To let your shoulders drop from your ears. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. May I be a guard for those who need protection. When I seek protection, may I find it and share it. For those who wish to cross to a further shore, may I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May I be open to the companionship of others as I make my way to places still before me. May I be a lamp in the darkness for all who seek it. May that light be never extinguished from my own sight and my own heart. May I be a resting place for the weary and be healing medicine for all who are sick. May I know the salve of others for my own afflictions, whether of the body or of the mind or of the heart. Where others see scarcity, may I see a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. As part of the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening and freedom from sorrow. May I delight in our common existence, holding most tenderly those with broken hearts. Let us now sit together in silence and stillness. Taha is going to tell you a lot of his own story as part of his sermon, so I'm not going to do a big introduction. I just wanted to say, I think I first met you when you were a high school student, but that was very briefly, and really got to know him when he was a student at Centenary in religious studies, and but was always just taken with his eagerness and energy about learning about other religions, and not only learning, but actively participating. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking now, and please welcome Taha Hyatt.
Good morning, everybody. Before I begin, I just want to take a really brief moment of silence for the violence going on right now in Israel and Palestine, and for Tawak Abu Jabbar, who's a Louisiana resident that was killed last night. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of this country, once hypothesized that America's destiny was as a multi-religious country, and firmly believed that in the future, our country's official religion would be Unitarianism. Unitarian Universalism didn't exist yet, but Thomas Jefferson was considered to be one of the proto-Unitarians, shall we say. Because he believed that Unitarianism was the only religion that could accurately represent the religious diversity of America. Peter Berger, a prominent philosopher of religion, believed that religion, like animals, had an evolutionary process. First, there was animism, such as indigenous religions and earth-based spirituality. And then as hunters and gatherers progressed and became more agrarian societies, then we would become polytheists, which is Hinduism, or the pagan group that we are lucky to be in community with at this church. And then that would eventually become the Abrahamic religions, which most of us are very well aware with, just based on the traditions that we were raised in. And that those religions would represent the law and dogmatic revelations that society felt it needed as it grew larger. After Abrahamic religions, he believed that universalist religions, such as Unitarian Universalism, and the Baha'i faith and Cao Dai would take over because society would have finally learned to care and value one another and had done away with things like wars. Finally, the last step, he believed, would have been atheism, because in his eyes, man no longer needed religion now that this utopian society had been created. Many view atheism as the logical evolution of embracing all religious traditions, and personally, I dispute that, which we'll get into later. But religion is important to many people, and otherwise it wouldn't exist. It gives us an otherworldly, intimate connection, and explains a lot of questions that we may have about life that may not be answered in other aspects of our lives. I've had what I'd like to describe as a multi-faith upbringing. My parents were nominally Muslim, and when my father was in the hospital, I lived for a while with Miss Bethany, who a lot of you probably know, she's Jewish, but she was a very frequent member of this church. And I would go to synagogue with her, which I remember being a very eye-opening experience, because before that, my only exposure to Judaism had been from on the news, everything in between Israel and the Palestinians. And so it gave me a more positive experience with Judaism. My aunt was a devout Methodist, and she would often teach me stories from the Bible, even if she was aware that they often deviated from the tradition that I was brought up in. And this brings me to a quote from a novel that I read one time which a lot of you have probably read, called Life of Pi. And the quote stuck with me a lot because it reflected a lot of the sentiments that family members I had would tell me when I would, want to explore different religious practices. And if any of you have read Life of Pi, it's about a young Indian kid, who gets trapped in a boat with a tiger. But, the beginning of the book, they do a really good job of talking about his experience in what is a very multi-religious society. And So the quote is when he's talking to his father, who's a kind of jaded with religion and who's an atheist. And his father tells him to believe in all religions is the same as to believe in none. Now, obviously I disagree with this, but I think a lot of people like me who may identify with different aspects of traditions or different traditions, oftentimes we kind of have to explain how a lot of these belief systems are seemingly irreconcilable. And to a large extent that is true, but in my opinion that doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing, because it just reflects the diversity of the human race, that we all have different beliefs and traditions, and a lot of them probably aren't the same, because that would be pretty boring if we all just believed or did the same thing. Now, like I mentioned earlier, while growing up, I remember being exposed to different religions. So even though I was still raised under my parents and taught to identify with their religion, they never really discouraged me from reading about whatever faith traditions I chose, which I did frequently as a child. But like Susan has said, it was only till I came to college that I really challenged myself to explore my faith tradition more beyond the place where I felt the most comfortable. That being said, one of the reasons why I, and I'm sure others, feel most comfortable in this church is because of the way that it values all religious beliefs. Throughout my spiritual journey, I have prayed Salat, which is like the traditional form of congregation prayer in Islam. I have prayed Salat at a family member's funeral with hundreds of men who I did not know, as it's customary in Islam. I have sung in church with friends, which at the time felt very strange to me because in the tradition I was raised in, there was not a lot of like music in the same way that Christian services have. I have sat in quiet meditation, which I feel is often one of the hardest spiritual practices to do because you have to quite literally focus on nothing, which I think our brains just aren't really wired to do that in our modern society. Like I've said, I've attended synagogue and I've attended bar mitzvahs for childhood friends, which is an important rite of passage in that tradition. And initially, if you don't know Hebrew, it can feel very alienating to be a part of that service and not really understand what's going on. But luckily, that's a very welcoming community, and so I had people around me that helped me to understand. I have witnessed and even taken part in chanting in different traditions, whether that be Hindu service or the pagan services that happen here sometimes. And that can be very jarring to an outsider who doesn't understand the meaning or the historical tradition of those words and why they bring comfort to certain people. I know especially during this chaotic time in our country, it can often feel like living in the middle of the Bible Belt is a curse. And I don't want to minimize that because I think there are a lot of people that are really turned off by religion in general because of the dogmatism that a lot of people here have, for better or for worse. But I will say that I also think that living here is a unique gift because we really have an opportunity to explore authentic religious practice in a way that a lot of people from less religious communities don't have. Whether that means just by talking to your neighbor about their faith, attending church with a family or member or friend, or maybe celebrating a holiday that you don't normally celebrate. Experiencing different religious traditions is important for us to challenge our own personal biases, as well as to strengthen the convictions that help us uncover new things about ourselves. I think a lot of people, even among Unitarians, tend to shy away from this because they don't want to have to face the possibility that they may be wrong about something, or even that if they are right, they may not necessarily want to view that nuanced picture about a certain belief. And I find this very strange because I don't know how you can truly be confident in your own beliefs and really know who you are as a person if you're not willing to entertain and learn about other points of view, even those that you may disagree with the exception of, like, I'm not saying people should accept bigotry, but with the exception of that, as long as it's not harming anybody, I think that you should really try to learn about other points of view, even those that may be very alien to you. And that's not to say, Even after you pass your 20s and your mind is fully developed, it's still, you need to be constantly learning about new information in order to, keep a healthy mind as you get older. And how can you expect to do that if you're not willing to expose yourself to different spiritual or religious traditions? And so I don't know if you remember back during Christmas when we read from Reverend Elise Hume Liu's Advent study. And I think Reverend Liu, she's someone who I really admire because she was a young adult, and she describes a lot in her book about how she was raised as a devout Baptist, and that when she attended college, she had this real crisis of faith. And it was the only way she was really able to overcome that crisis of faith was by going to different services. She said she went to Episcopalian service with her friends. She celebrated Chinese New Year for the first time, despite having being a part of that community, never having really celebrated in a religious context. And she describes how doing those things really not only strengthened her faith, but it really helped her rediscover herself as a Christian. And the same applies to us, arguably more so, because the way Unitarians view Scripture and tradition is very different than other churches. I remember one of the first times I actually came to this church, somebody told me that this is a do-it-yourself church. And while some may disagree with that, and they're allowed to, I think it really encapsulates well that this is a do-it-yourself faith. Like, how can you expect to be grounded in Unitarian Universalist faith if you're not willing to expose yourself to other traditions, since that's a core pillar of what Unitarian Universalism is about? And that includes even the ones that you may balk at. Some of the most spiritual and kindest people I've ever met are evangelicals. Even if I may not necessarily just agree with them personally, I think that there's something to be learned from there. And in order to have a truly spiritually attuned mind, you need to have an open one. Now, World Religion Day was started in 1950 by the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, which, if you don't know, is the governing body of the Baha'i faith in America. Although it didn't really take off outside of the Baha'i community until the 80s, early 90s. And since 2002, it has been consistently practiced on the third Sunday of every January, not just in America, but internationally as well. Contrary to what you may think, the goal of this holiday is not to try to proselytize people into any particular faith tradition. Rather, it is for all religions to come together and share a little part of each other with the community, for outsiders to come and learn without the fear of coercion or proselytization. The Baha'i faith, the tradition where the holiday came from, is a tradition of progressive revelation. While Baha'is no longer identify with Islam, they were once seen as a sect of Shia Islam, and their prophet, Baha'u'llah, was originally a Shiite from Shiraz, Iran, which at the time was under the control of the Ottomans and the British. So during this time, in the early 1900s, Baha'u'llah declared that God had given him revelations with the goal to unite all of humanity under one banner, one religion, of peace, unity, and justice. Most of what we learn about Shias is the racist coverage on the news that paints them as terrorists or pirates. But what we don't learn is that the Shiites are a very proud people who have endured lots of persecution over the centuries that even goes on until now, whether that be the assassination of their founder and his family, Hussein, who's the nephew of Muhammad, the persecution at the hands of the Abbasids and the Ottomans, and later the Americans and the Europeans, and more recently under the Taliban and ISIS. And yet, through all of this strife, they always clung to their faith that Hussein, in the form of his son, would return as this messianic figure who, maybe not in his physical form, but in some kind of spiritual suspension, for lack of better words, that Hussein would return and be called the Mahdi, and that he would, when the world was right, basically, he would come when everything was, when the world was basically where we needed to be, when we had, become peaceful and everything and ended all wars. And so Baha'u'llah claimed to be the gate or the Bab, in which the Mahdi would appear, but only when the time was right. Now, for those who are not very spiritual, they may see this as a silly superstition, but in many ways, Baha'u'llah did accomplish what Hussein had promised to return for. He did the seemingly impossible in bringing every major world religion together to sit down and simply talk and learn about one another without trying to convert each other. During that time, it was very similar to how the world feels kind of right now. Like, things felt very upside down. You know, there was a lot of industrialization, so a lot of changes were happening that people couldn't really keep up with. The Jewish people were being persecuted in Europe, similar to how people are being persecuted now. The world was already in the process of starting the First World War, which sometimes it feels like, but you know, and yet this man came and got all of these different religions to, like I said, sit down and talk, which is really the spirit of what World Religion Day is. And he was so dedicated to uniting all of humanity's religions under one banner of you know, ending human suffering and bringing peace to everyone, that he still had unfinished writings about this in his study when he passed away while living in exile from Iran. And this is the legacy of World Religion Day that we should all remember whenever we practice this day. And I want all of you, if you leave with nothing else, to leave with this. Baha'u'llah brought people together from different creeds, colors, experiences, political persuasions, for the purpose of bettering humanity during one of the most violent and politically volatile times of world history. He established what he believed was God's house of justice in Haifa, Israel, a place where people have witnessed a lot of injustice on both sides, and yet are still hopeful for something better. If Baha'u'llah could do all of these things simply by bringing together different religions, then think about what you could do in this world that we're in today, simply by going up to your neighbor who you may really disagree with and offering to go to church with them, or to learn about why they feel what they feel. And even if you may not necessarily understand it, letting them know that you understand that this is important to them, and because it's important to them, you would like to make an effort to learn why that is. Now, to answer the quote from earlier from Life of Pi, to believe in all religions is not the same as believing in none of them, because what it really means is that you have hope and spiritual yearning to understand that every belief has some value to it, no matter what that may be. And that adds to our mosaic of humanity. If we want to repair the very stark divisions that all of us are much too aware currently plague our society, then instead of doom scrolling on Facebook or watching the news and feeling dismayed with how people seem to be filled with hate towards one another, or have such dogmatic convictions, instead do what Baha'u'llah did. Reach out to those you normally wouldn't reach out to. Take yourself out of your comfort zone, and maybe one day we will be able to achieve his vision where nobody is persecuted for what they believe or who they may be, and all people of all religions will honor each other as brothers, sisters, and siblings. So, thank you.
Gray hymnal number 318. Stand and sing with gusto.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love. ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and justice, strive to make us free.
Thank you, Taha, too, for the wonderful message this morning, and thank you, choir members, for helping us with our music today. Bob Jordan and Sally Wood and Pam Carlo. And as I invite Taha back up here to join me for the closing, I want to encourage you to stick around a little bit. When we were in Baton Rouge, of course, Sally already knew about this because Sally came from the Baton Rouge church. They have their coffee and kind of socializing area that's just right outside the sanctuary, and it's really nice. And so Susan Yellett was here last night moving furniture and getting things kind of rearranged to create a really nice little area where you can maybe stop, have a cup of coffee or tea, or just stop and pivot a little bit, just hang out. And so we would love for you to stay with us. Taha, if you'll go ahead. Say anything briefly about Cowdai before we
Yeah,
do
well,
this?
sorry, you can do this one.
I was gonna do the first one, and then you were.
Okay, good. So just if you don't know, Cow Dai is a tradition that's very similar to Unitarian Universalism, not exactly the same, but it was founded in 1926 in Vietnam, and it focuses on the belief in like all world religions being important to, or one God being represented by all the different world religions. And so they believe in basically every major tradition. And so both of these prayers will kind of encompass that. And there's like a prostration part at the end, which I'll do, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And these were translated by Dr. Hung Bui and our very own Nasha Beck-Hui.
I pray to thank the Transcendent Ones for guiding me as I have asked, from my departure to my return, as I accomplish my worldly tasks. I will follow in the footsteps of King Hom, greeting the Ancient Mother, as I cultivate a devoted heart. I go forth, as the Lord Buddha said, forsaking earthly kingdom for enlightenment, for as long as you take my part. I'll be as Lao Tzu upon Buffalo Chariot in search of the great Tao, striving to impart only great truths in honor of Christ on the Mount. I pray to those enlightened ones to help me reach wisdom in this life, so that I may help lift humanity off of karma's wheel of strife.
We pray that the wisdom of the great Tao be widely spread on earth, shining the way to all creatures of nature's birth. May all humanity be redeemed and our whole world know peace, and may the places we meet to worship you be granted safety's lease. Namo Cao Dai, Tian O, Dai double tat mahatat, Namo Khao Dai Tien Ong, double tat mahatat, Namo Khao Dai Tien Ong, double tat mahatat.
Go in peace.
Way she gives is like the earth. She gives like the sky, and I may never understand why some people can live such a simple love. But I've heard the butterfly wings stir up cyclones, and my actions settle on stars. Still, you mothers of mercy, focus that force and bring life into bloom where you are. Oh, how does your river flow? How does your garden grow? Too late to learn at your feet. So I'll have to wade into the wake of the master's retreat. The way she lives is like the birds. She gives shelter like a tree, and see how living on the rim she touches every one of them with such a simple love. I've heard the butterfly wings stir up cyclones, and my actions settle on stars. Still, you mothers of mercy, focus that force and bring life into bloom where you are. Oh, how does your river flow? How does your garden grow? Too late to learn at your feet. So I'll have to wade into the wake of the master's retreat. Once there was a way to get back home. I used to know the way to get back home. Isn't it here somehow? Isn't love clear somehow? Strength of the mountains, depth of the wind, conscience that covers the world, curled like a finger that draws you closer to a life that still haunts you. All that remains is such a simple love. All that sustains is such a simple love. But I've heard the butterfly wings stir up cyclones, and my actions settle on stars. Still, you mothers of mercy, focus that force and bring life into bloom